Hi, I'm Tony Fanchi.
I'm Chris Fanchi, and we are designers of WWII, the card game.
We're going to show you how the game plays here, and I'll be playing as the Axis and Chris will be playing as the Allies. So we're set up here to begin a demonstration game of WWII, the card game. During this game, Chris will be playing the Allies, and I will be playing the side of the Axis. Before we get started, there's a couple things we'd like to point out. The first thing we would like to point out is that these components we are playing with today are prototype components, so they will not be the same quality that you will see when you purchase WWII, the card game. The tokens that we are using here will actually be punchboard tokens, and the card stock will be a little bit thicker than this. Also, some art and layout on the cards may change during the course of production. The second thing we would like to point out is that we will not be covering every rules situation that may come up during this video. We just want to give you an overview of how the game plays. So if you have specific rules questions, you can always consult the rulebook, and if you have trouble finding it there, you can contact us through fanfaregames.net. The first thing we are going to do is we each select a starting location. So we each have those here. We reveal them at the same time. And if they are not the same location, which in this case they are not, then we're good. Make note that starting locations and all locations should be oriented so that the black text faces the Axis player and the gray text faces the Allies player. An easy way to remember that is the text color will match the background color on your cards. The second thing we will do, which we have done already, is we will select 10 cards from our deck to place them underneath our homeland. We'll cover what exactly homelands are for as we go through the game. Now that we have our starting location set up and our homelands to our side, we each draw our starting hand. The Axis player always goes first, and so they will draw one fewer card to start than the Allied player. The Axis player draws 8, and the Allied player draws 9. WWII, the card game, is a turn-based game, so the Axis player will go first, take a full turn, then it will be the Allied player's turn. A turn is made up of 6 phases. During the first phase, the deplete phase, requires me to have units at locations where my opponent does not. Since we don't have any units on the table yet, obviously nothing will happen there, so we'll skip that phase for my turn and move to the deploy phase. During the deploy phase, the active player will bring cards from his or her hand into play by spending resources. In order to gain resources, you will need factories. The way you create a factory is take a card from your hand, it can be any card of any type, and place it face down in your industry area. This card is now, for the rest of the game, considered a factory and can be used to gain resources. You are limited in your industry area to a number of cards equal to the total number of locations on the table. At this time, there's only 2 locations, so I can have at most 2 factories. So I will play a second factory down here. So now I have 2 resources that I can spend on my turn. Before I spend resources, I'm going to use my homeland. Now, we discussed before that the homeland has 10 cards placed beneath it at the start of the game, and you can access those by using the text on the homeland. In this case, I'm going to exhaust my homeland by rotating it 90 degrees counterclockwise and take one location card from below it and put that location card into play. Now that my homeland is exhausted, it cannot be exhausted again, so I cannot use it again this turn. But I have put another location in play, meaning I can put down another industry.
While this game is turn-based, there are a number of cards that are allowed to be used on either player's turn. Homelands are an example of one of those cards. The homeland does have the ability for players to exhaust it to take any one card from beneath it into their hand, and that can happen up to 3 times per game. After he has chosen to play his location card, I'm going to take my option to use my homeland, so I exhaust it the same way, rotate it 90 degrees counterclockwise, and I will choose one of the cards from beneath my homeland to take into hand. I don't have to show him what this card is, and it goes straight into my hand. I can use it just like any other card in my deck. I will also then take an allied control token from the supply, place it on there to indicate that I've used one of my 3 pulls per game.
Alright, so now that Chris has taken his action, it's back to me to take another action. So what I'm going to do next is play a strategy industry. Now, like factories, this card will play to my industry area and counts against my cap. So now I have 3 cards in my industry area and 3 locations on the table, so I have as many as I can play right now.
It is important to note that your homeland does not count against your industry cap, even though it will go in that same general area.
Industry strategies like this one, Serve for Citizenship, give you various effects on them, and those effects will be in play while that card is in play. Unlike factories, which are only used for resources, strategies provide their ability in the form of their text, but you cannot use a strategy industry for a resource unless it says so specifically on the card. Now, Serve for Citizenship allows my regiments matching my homeland, which is Germany, to deploy at -1 cost. To bring a unit into play, you place it at a location. Now, I'm going to place this German Expeditionary Force at Warsaw, Poland. The Expeditionary Force is a regiment listed here in its keyword box, and it has a deploy cost of 2. So normally I would have to spend 2 of my resources to play this unit. However, because it is a regiment, Serve for Citizenship allows it to deploy at -1. Additionally, my land units, according to the text on Warsaw, Poland, deploy at -1 at that location. Therefore, this unit deploys for 0, so it is free with no cost. Whenever a unit enters play, it enters play exhausted, which means you won't be able to use it for any exhaust effect on that turn. Even though it cannot exhaust again on the turn, it still could participate in a battle if I chose to battle. Now, because this location has one of my units and no units for my opponent, I take control of that location by placing 1 control token on the Axis side on that card. Now, taking control of the location immediately doesn't give you any real benefit, but it will be important later in the game. The next thing I will do on my turn is I will deploy a German infantry unit. This one has a cost of 1, but again it is reduced by Serve for Citizenship and by Warsaw. In this case it would be -1, but in WWII the card game the minimum is 0, so it just means I get to do it for free. Now, when the German infantry is deployed, it has the text that I may ready a German unit here. So I will choose this German unit to become readied for the turn. And finally, I will play one more card on my turn. I am going to play a air unit, the Henkel HE-111 bomber. Now this unit has a deploy cost of 2. It is not a land unit, so it does not get the bonus for Warsaw. It also is not a regiment, so it does not get the deploy reduction for Serve for Citizenship. So that means I have to pay 2 resources in order to deploy it. In order to pay resources, I exhaust a number of factories equal to the resource cost of the card, in this case 2. I've exhausted both of my industries, so therefore the cost of the card is paid and it is deployed. Now, I've only got 2 cards left in my hand and I don't have any resources left to spend, so I will be done with my deployment phase. Next thing I will do is move to my battle phase. There are no opposing units at any locations where I have units, so I can't battle anywhere. So I will move on to my move phase. During this phase I could move units to other locations, but since I deployed them where I wanted them, I don't need to do that right now. So I will move on to my draw phase. During your draw phase, you always draw at least one card. You get one card for free. If I had any resources left, I could draw additional cards, but since I do not, I just get the one. So the final phase of my turn is the ready phase. During this phase, all cards for both players are readied, so turned so that they face the player who played them once again, and then that makes them available to be used on the next turn. So thus ends the Axis player turn, so now it's time for the Allied players.
So the first thing I will do as the Allied player is my deplete phase. Once again, much like the Axis player, I don't have anything on the table, so the deplete phase is not going to happen for me. We'll get to that on his next turn for sure. The next thing I'm going to do is go to my deploy phase. Now, I don't have any industries out yet, so I have a couple of cards in my hand that I want to put down in my industry area. The first one I'm going to play is a strategy industry, much like his Serve for Citizenship. This is Wendy the Welder. Now this card is interesting because it is a nationality-specific card. And it will give me a deployment bonus for my American units. Just because the card has an American flag on it does not mean that it has to be in an American deck. That is important to note. Your cards in your deck do not have to match your homeland, but you do get special benefits if they do. The second thing I'm going to play is another industry strategy, and this is Conscription Act. It is basically the same thing as his Serve for Citizenship, but for the Allies. Then I'm going to put a card down in my industry area as a resource. I am now at the industry limit because there are only 3 locations. However, I have not yet used my homeland, so I will do that to go ahead and put out another location.
While he's searching his homeland for a card, I'm going to do the same thing you did on my turn. I will exhaust my homeland in order to pick one card that I want from my homeland and take it into hand. And then I place a control token on my homeland indicating that I have used it once, and I can only use it 2 more times for that specific purpose.
Now in this situation, I chose to play a location rather than taking a card, so I don't have to add a control token. So now I have an industry limit of 4 instead of 3, so I will put another card down as a factory.
It's important to note at this point that you can only put down factories or industry cards during your deploy phase. So even though the cap is now greater than my current industry limit, I cannot deploy any more factories until it is my deploy phase once again.
So the next thing I'm going to do is use Wendy the Welder's text, which says, during my deploy phase, I can place a card from my hand on top of my use stack to reduce the cost of the next American sea or air unit I deploy this phase by 3. The use stack is going to be set atop your reserve stack, and at the end of every turn during the ready phase, the use stack will be recycled beneath your reserve stack. So now the next unit I play, American air or sea unit, is deploy -3. So I'm going to play the USS Ranger. It has a deploy cost of 2, but because of Wendy the Welder, it is actually -3. Again, it would be limited at 0. And I will immediately take control of this sea location because I have a unit there and he does not. The next thing I'm going to do is spend 1 resource by rotating one of my factories, exhausting one of my factories, to play an air unit. Now, air units can only go to locations that have the base keyword. Warsaw, Poland has the base keyword, and that is why the Axis player was able to play the Henkel there. Sea locations do not have the base keyword. None of them do. However, the USS Ranger that I deployed earlier has base because it is an aircraft carrier, so I'm able to play my air unit there. Finally, I will spend another resource to play a destroyer escort at the location, and that will end my deploy phase. Once again, we don't have any units in front of each other, so we won't have any battles this turn. We would next go to the move phase, in which I could move any of my units at this sea location to another sea location. There's no reason for me to do that either. And finally move to the draw phase. In the draw phase, I automatically draw 1 card by rule, and then I may draw additional cards if I have any resources remaining At this time, I do not. And that will be the end of my turn, so we go to the ready phase, and then it will be back to the Axis player.
So both players ready all their cards during the ready phase, and Chris will move his used stack to the bottom of his reserve stack. So the first phase during my second turn is the deplete phase, and now it is relevant. Because I control Poland, with no opposing units there, therefore it's considered controlled unopposed, I can deplete my opponent of cards at that location. So by default, a depletion is only one card, but certain abilities may add to that. So I will deplete the allies for one card at Warsaw. Now, because I do not have units at both land and sea, I currently only have units on land, it's going to cost me one resource for each location at which I wish to deplete. The reason for that is to encourage players to participate both on sea and on land. So I will spend one resource by rotating one factory card.
By rule, I have to lose the top card of my reserve stack, and that is my one card loss.
So now that my deplete phase is over, I move to my deploy phase. Now, there are now 4 locations in play, so I now have room for one more industry card. So I will deploy another industry strategy called Blitzkrieg. And I'll show you how that card works in just a second.
And what you'll notice with cards like Wendy the Welder, Conscription Act, Serve for Citizenship, and Blitzkrieg, is these are the kind of cards that you're going to usually design your deck around. That's why they're called strategy cards, because they will affect your overarching strategy for the entire game. And these cards are some of the most powerful in the game, which is why a lot of times you're going to find yourself putting them under your homeland to ensure that you get them.
Now, after some thinking, I've got a plan of attack. The first thing I will do on my turn is play a used tactic, combined fleet action. Now, tactic cards are a type of card that can be played at most any time during the game. They're kind of like your events or your interrupts from other games. In this case, the tactic card has a phase restriction. It says your deploy phase, so that means I can only play it during my deploy phase. And its text says deploy a C unit for -1 resources. So when I play this card, I must deploy with it a C unit. In this case, a pocket battleship. This battleship has a cost of 3, but it's reduced by 1 for combined fleet action, so it will only cost me 2. First, I will exhaust one factory to give me 1 resource, but now I don't have any other factories that are ready. However, I can use my homeland to gain a resource as well. This is one of the 3 options you can use your homeland for. So I will rotate exhaust Germany to gain the second resource that I need. Now that the tactic had its ability used, because it is a used tactic, it will go face down in my used stack. Now I have a response to my deployment, and that is Blitzkrieg. Blitzkrieg has the ability to exhaust it in response to my deploying a German unit. And it says, if I just deployed a German unit, ready one factory and ready that unit. So that means this unit becomes ready, and I can ready one factory and therefore get another resource for myself. Now that is all I'm going to deploy this turn because I've only got one card left in my hand. So I will move on to my battle phase. So let's give you an example of how a battle works. In order to battle, both players must have units at the same location, in this case at the Gulf of Finland. So I'm going to initiate battle at the Gulf of Finland. The first step of a battle is the response segment. If either player had a card that plays in response to a battle being initiated, we could play it right now. Do you have anything, Chris?
I do not.
I don't either, so we'll move to the second segment, the air support segment. During this segment, the attacking player only, which would be me, can call in air support. In order to do that, you're going to have to expend one resource to fuel your planes and fly them over. So I will exhaust my factory to call in my Henkel HE-111 bomber. When I do that, I bring the unit over and it becomes a participant in the battle.
He is allowed to bring in any air units that he has in the region, and that is just one of the keywords that's found on cards. But it's also important to note that you may only bring in air units that are ready. So if he had just deployed the Henkel this turn and it was exhausted, he wouldn't be able to bring it in.
That's correct. So now that the air support segment is done, we move to the action segment. During the action segment, Chris and I are going to take turns using actions on our units in the battle. Now you can do any number of things. You can play tactic cards, you can take actions listed on your units in the battle, or you can use units to attack or shoot at certain other units. Because I am the attacker, I get to go first. So I'm going to use my Henkel HE-111 to target Chris's aircraft carrier, the USS Ranger. Each unit card will list on it a target and certain cards that it can shoot at. In this case, the HE-111 can shoot at a land unit or at a sea unit, and the USS Ranger is a sea unit. So in order to shoot, you exhaust the unit, you choose your target. In this case, I am choosing the Ranger.
Now before Tony continues with that, I actually have a response to that. My destroyer escort specifically has the keyword guard. Now guard means that it can be used to basically redirect a shot at a certain unit type. This specific destroyer escort guards aircraft carriers. So I can choose as a response to exhaust my destroyer escort to redirect his shot at it rather than at my aircraft carrier, and I will choose to do that. That is because my aircraft carrier is providing my base. If I lose the aircraft carrier, my airplane would no longer have somewhere to be based.
So now that my shot has been redirected to the destroyer escort, I need to recalculate my attack modifier. Because the bomber targets sea units at a +2 and the destroyer escort is still a sea unit, I will have a +2 for my attack. To determine whether a shot hits, you will need to reveal a Fortune of War. To do that, you draw the top card of your reserve stack, flip it over, show it to your opponent, and check the number in the upper right-hand corner. That is the fortune value. In this case, I drew a 3. I add to that my modifier of 2 to get a total of 5, and compare that to the defense value of the target.
The destroyer escort has a defense value of 2, so his shot total of 5 will hit, and it is important to note that you have to beat the defense value. Just tying the defense value is considered a miss. So I place a hit token on the unit because it was hit.
And the Fortune of War card is used, so it goes onto my used stack.
Now I have the option to shoot back. It is my action. So I will choose to use my Douglas bomber because it can shoot at sea units and it has a very good modifier of +2. So I will target the pocket battleship. The bomber can also shoot at land units, but there are none in this battle. So I need to defeat his defense value of 4. I'm getting a +2 modifier, so I will reveal a fortune. It is a 3, another copy of the same card in fact, and that gives me a total value of 5 against his pocket battleship.
So that's a hit on the battleship, so a hit token goes on the card.
And the fortune is placed in my use stack.
So now the action is back to me and my pocket battleship. Now, even though the pocket battleship was hit, it doesn't mean that it has to be exhausted or that it's removed from the battle or anything. It just means at the end of the battle it will have to be lost. So I will use my pocket battleship to make an attack. It has the keyword of target sea unit at 0 modifier, so I can shoot at any sea unit. And I will look at the options. They are the Ranger, or I could shoot at the destroyer escort again, though in most cases hitting a unit twice isn't that useful, so I will attempt to hit the Ranger. So with 0 modifier, I will need to draw greater than a 4.
And because the destroyer escort is already exhausted, it can't use its ability again to try to guard against this new shot.
Alright, so my fortune reveal is a 6. That's greater than a 4, so that results in a hit. So Chris places a hit token on the card. Now, in addition to that, the Pocket Battleship has the keyword Casualty 1. That means when this unit hits an opposing unit with a shot, the opponent must lose one card from his or her deck.
So I have to lose the top card of my deck. I could choose to lose the top card of my used stack, but I'm going to go ahead and just lose the top card of my deck. And it is the USS Santee, my other aircraft carrier, so that's kind of a bummer.
So now the action is back to Chris.
So now I only have one unit left to attack, and it is the USS Ranger. It does have battle phase game text, but that's not going to be useful in this particular situation. So I'm going to rotate, and I can fire at a sea unit or an air unit. Both of them are a 0 modifier. Since the Pocket Battleship is already hit, and it has a higher defense value, I don't want to shoot at it again. So I'll fire at his Hinkle, which has just a defense value of 2. So I reveal the top fortune, and it is a 3. So despite my 0 modifier, that is still a hit.
So a hit token goes on the Hinkle, and the action comes back to me. Now, even though all of my units are exhausted, I could play a tactic card if I had one that would be useful in this battle, but I do not, so I will pass.
I too will pass.
And that ends the action segment of the battle. Next we move to the power segment, which is when we will determine who is the winner of the battle. To do that, we are going to total the power values of all of our units in the battle. Now for me, I have the Hinkle here, which has a power of 2. It's the top value on the left side of the card. And the Pocket Battleship has a 4, so that's a total of 6. Additionally, the German homeland gives the German player a +3 to their total power when they are attacking an opponent in a battle. So since I am the attacker and I have at least one German unit, I will get a +3 to my total for a total of 9.
Now, I don't have any modifiers like that, and I don't have any cards on the table that can really help me, so I'm just going to be looking at the base power on all of my units. The Ranger is a 2, while my other 2 are just 1s, so I only have a total power of 4. Right now, I'm pretty far behind.
Now, battles in WWII, the card game, are not predictable, just like in real life. There is a random element to it, and in this game we reflect that through a fortune reveal. Each of us will have the opportunity to reveal one card from our decks and add that card's fortune value to our total power. And now this is optional, and in most cases you'll want to use it, but there are a few corner cases where you may not want to. So we do that at the same time. I reveal a 2.
I reveal a 6.
Ooh, lucky there. So my total is 9 plus 2, which is 11.
So despite drawing a 6, I'm only up to power 10, so I'm still behind in the battle.
That means I have won the battle, and I have taken control of the Gulf of Finland. I've flipped the control marker on the location to the Axis side, and the power segment is complete. So now we move to the outcome segment. Now, the loser in the battle will have to lose cards equal to the difference in the total power between the two players. In this case, it was just 1 power, so Chris would have to lose 1 card from his deck. However, there is a way of mitigating the amount of damage that you take, and that is through forfeiting.
Each unit has a value at the bottom of its 3 key values on the left side, and that is its forfeit value. If that unit is lost from a location where a battle occurred, that value reduces the battle damage that you must take at that location, thus reducing the amount of cards you have to lose. So if I chose to lose the Destroyer Escort, for example, with its 3 forfeit, that would reduce the amount of cards I would have to lose for losing the battle by 3. Now, however, in this particular instance, even though I'm behind by 1, I have the ability to keep both of these units in play because of the repair keyword. Certain units, particularly mechanical units like sea units, air units, and vehicles, have the ability to be damaged when they are hit. Normally, hit units are required to be lost at the end of a battle, but if a hit unit has the repair keyword and only has 1 hit token on it, that unit can be damaged instead by removing the damage token and flipping the card over. This card can now be repaired on the player's next deploy phase by paying the number in parentheses next to the repair keyword. I will choose to do that with both the Ranger and the Destroyer Escort. What's important to note, however, is I cannot reduce my battle damage by doing that. I don't get to use their forfeit value. So I still am down by 1, and I will choose just to lose 1 card off the top of my deck. In this case, it is a Marine Regiment.
Alright, so similar to Chris, both of my units here have the repair keyword, so that means I could damage them. I will choose to damage the bomber by removing the hit token and flipping it face down. Now, the question of whether to damage the pocket battleship is more complex. If I damage it, its power is considered to be 0, and its forfeit value is only 1. So that means it would be very vulnerable to a counterattack. I have no resources with which to move the pocket battleship, so it would be a sitting duck in the Gulf of Finland, so I am going to let it die and have it go to my lost stack. So now that we have finished the outcome segment by damaging or losing any hit units, and Chris lost cards to battle damage, we move to the aerial withdrawal segment. Now, both players during this segment will check to see if they control a base at the battle location. In this case, the location is a sea location, which will never have base on the location itself, so I will have to retreat my air unit back to a base I do control, in this case, Warsaw. So that is done for free, and on a future turn I will be able to repair that bomber so that it can be redeployed to another battle.
Now, unfortunately, I was not so fortunate. I do not control a base here anymore because the aircraft carrier is damaged. It no longer gets to use its keywords, thus the base goes away. I also don't have any other bases like the Axis player did. So my only option is for my air unit to retreat to my use stack. I place it directly in my use stack for free, and it is gone. Now, since his bomber is no longer at the location, he no longer has anything opposing me at this location, and I actually immediately would take the location back under my control.
So even though I did a lot of damage with my battle, maybe it wasn't a great strategic move to battle there. But there was some luck of the battle in the fortune draw, so those are the types of risks that you have to take. So now I have the opportunity to initiate any other battles I want. There are no locations where I could battle, so I would go to my move phase. Again, it requires resources to move units, and I have none ready, so I will proceed directly to my draw phase, where I get to draw a card for free. I could spend resources to draw further, but I have none, so I will move to my ready segment, at which point we will ready all of our exhausted cards in play, and we will recirculate our used stacks below our reserve stacks. And it's Chris's turn now.
Okay, so now that it's my turn, I have to take a look at the board as it is after the results of that battle. I have some stuff in my hand that I'd really like to deploy, but my units here are damaged, and as he said with his pocket battleship, they are basically sitting ducks. If I don't repair them, they're very low power and very low forfeit value. So when I consider the option of depleting during my deplete phase, which is the first phase of my turn, I would have to spend one because I don't have units at land and sea. However, I have to pay to repair, so I really can't afford to pay to deplete if I want to bring either of my sea units back. However, I do have some cards in my hand that could potentially reinforce here, so I'm going to go ahead and make the decision to spend one and deplete him for one card.
So because I'm depleted, I have to lose one from either my reserve stack or my used stack. I have no used stack, so it will come from the reserve, and it is a German infantry.
So now that I've finished depleting, I go to my deploy phase. I want to be sure I reinforce these units here because they are very vulnerable at this time. So the first thing I'm going to do is use Wendy the Welder to put a card from my hand into my use stack to play a American sea unit for 3 fewer resources. I will play a battleship, which has a deploy of 3, so it plays for 0. And this does qualify as an American unit because the homeland flag means that it will copy whatever nationality your homeland is. The next thing I'm going to do is spend 1 resource to repair my damaged destroyer escort. So it comes into play exhausted because when you repair, it's basically like you're redeploying the unit. Finally, I'm going to use the game text on the Gulf of Finland, which says, if I control, once per turn I may exhaust my unit here to ready 1 factory. Even though the USS Ranger is damaged, it can still take advantage of game text like that, and if I had other cards that allowed it to exhaust to do certain things, I would be able to do that as well. So I will exhaust it to ready 1 of my factories, and then as the final action of my deploy phase, I'm going to use my homeland to play another location. I will deploy the English Channel, Dunkirk Crossing, and this is another sea location, and this particular sea location has the game text of deplete +1 here, meaning that it depletes for an additional 1 resource when it depletes. Now, because this location has the Great Britain flag on it, it must play next to the other Great Britain location, the Orkney Islands. And my homeland is exhausted for doing that. That is all for my deploy phase. Tony has the option of taking any actions. There's nothing to do in the battle phase because once again we are not in front of each other. So I will go to my move phase. Now here I'm going to take advantage of the rule that any factories you have that are tactics may be played from your factory area, and I will play the card Fleet Mobilization. What this tactic says is, during my move phase, my sea units gain Swift until the end of the turn. Swift says that the unit may move for free. Normally, I would have to pay 1 resource to be able to move any of my units at any location to another location. But because I played this tactic, I am able to move all of my sea units for free to the Dunkirk Crossing, and I take control of it. Now, even though I don't have any units at the Gulf of Finland, I still am considered to control it. However, I cannot deplete there because you have to have at least 1 unit at the location to deplete. Now, the advantage of the USA homeland is that when your American unit takes control of a location, you are allowed to draw an additional card. So because I take control of the English Channel, I get to draw 1 card. Finally, we will move to my draw phase. I draw 1 card automatically at the start of the phase, and I may spend any remaining resources I have. I have 1 to draw additional cards. I ask Tony if he has any actions during my draw phase.
No.
I will pass as well, and that will be it for my draw phase. We then ready all of our cards and advance to the next turn.
So there you have the first few turns of a game of WWII the card game. We didn't have time to go over every rule that might come up during the game, but hopefully you've gotten a good idea of how the game plays and whether it might be something that you would be interested in trying out.
If you have any rules questions or anything that you'd like to figure out about the game, please feel free to consult the rulebook or contact us through fanfaregames.net or any one of our social media sites. Thanks a lot for watching.
Thank you.